Hey everybody, welcome back to another Facebook Live with New England Aquarium. I'm Dr. Cara Dodge, and I'm a research scientist at the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life at the New England Aquarium, where I study sea turtles and the leatherback sea turtle in particular. So, over the last few weeks, the aquarium has received a lot of questions from people about jellyfish, as there are a lot of lion's mane jellyfish washing up on beaches, showing up inshore near some really popular areas, swimming areas. And so you might ask, what do jellyfish have to do with sea turtles? And the answer is actually quite a lot. So I'm going to introduce you to some sea jellies that occur right here off Massachusetts. The lion's mane is just one of several jelly species we have here every season. And we'll talk about jellies as a food source for our local sea turtles, especially turtles like the leatherback, and how leatherbacks have some special adaptations that have allowed them to evolve this very unusual diet of sea jellies. So I have some pictures and slides that hopefully can help you visualize what I'm describing. And then we'll jump over to those now. And I just wanted to say, if you have any questions as we're going through this, just go ahead and write those in the comments. And then after I finish showing you some of these pictures and movies, we'll be coming back for a question and answer at the very end. So go ahead and write your questions in there as we move along. So I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret, and that is that I love jellyfish. I know a lot of people consider these a nuisance, but I actually really love these creatures. I know that they are amazingly well adapted to a wide range of different habitats, including freshwater, estuaries, and marine water, ocean water. They're astonishingly beautiful. If you've ever been to the aquarium and seen our jellyfish display, you can see that for yourself. They're absolutely magnificent animals when they're moving through the water column. And we still have a lot to learn about them. They're actually pretty mysterious. Different parts of their life cycle are still very mysterious. So when people tell me that they're seeing a lot of jellyfish, I actually get really excited because that usually means we're going to start seeing leatherback sea turtles, which come inshore to feed on these jellies. So to me, jellyfish are basically synonymous with leatherback turtles. So I want to introduce you to some of the usual suspects that we find around here. The type of jellies most people are familiar with are the scyphozoan jellyfish, or the true jellyfish is what people call them. So those top three jellyfish in this picture, these beautiful illustrations, are from Dale Calder's classification key in the Biological Bulletin, show you a mauve stinger on the left, and in the middle you see an Atlantic sea nettle, and on the right you see a lion's mane jellyfish, which is the one we keep hearing about in the news. And so these three jellyfish are actually quite common around here. What seems to be uncommon this year is that the number of these jellyfish that are moving into these really near shore areas close to beaches. So they're always here, they're just not always as far inshore. And what's also potentially kind of unusual this year is that some very, very large specimens of these lion's mane in particular are being reported. So these specimens can get quite large, but normally the very, very large ones are sort of limited to more northern, colder waters off of, for example, Atlantic Canada. So it's a little bit unusual for us to be seeing these very large lion's manes this far south. But these are the true jellies that, as I said, they're quite common around here in the summer and the fall. Another species, true jellyfish species that we see here is the moon jellyfish, which if you look at the bottom left, the one that has the four little circles on the top of its bell. So the moon jelly is another scyphozoan jelly we find around here, usually from spring right through summer. Maybe not quite as common in late summer and fall. In terms of their nuisance level, you can get a very nasty sting from sea nettles, lion's mane, and the mauve stinger, but moon jellies will not bother you. Another type of larger sea jelly that we see around here occasionally is the crystal jelly, which you can see in the bottom right of this illustration. And we also see other types of what we call gelatinous zooplankton. So that can be comb jellies, those little guys in the middle you see there. Those are three types of comb jellies, ctenophores, I should say. And we also see salps, which is another type of gelatinous plankton. So I want to show you guys. This is a nice little movie that shows you a nice bloom of these moon jellies. that we found during some of our leatherback sea turtle research. So these moon jellies are readily identifiable by those 4 circles that you see on the top of the bell there. And you can also see lots and lots of what I was calling the comb jellies. The ctenophores are also kind of mixed in with these moon jellies. And these are very common. These comb jellies are very common here off Massachusetts, usually mixed in with these true jellyfish during the summer and right into fall. Neither of these types of jellies, sea jellies, give you a sting. You don't need to worry about these. And it's actually quite fun to swim with comb jellies, ctenophores in the summer and the fall. They actually bioluminesce, which means they emit light. And so at night, if they're agitated, you stir up the water with comb jellies, they'll actually emit this greenish glow, which is really fun to swim in. And the next video, or next picture, I should say, this is a crystal jelly. These are less commonly seen. We do see them from time to time, but they are less common than those other species. They have a really interesting history. I won't get into too much detail on that, but essentially the green fluorescent protein, which is used in a lot of scientific research, was taken from this jellyfish a long time ago. And so it has a really important place in scientific study and method. And this is a video here. And this is the lion's mane. So this is the one that people, you're hearing about in the news. People are seeing these near popular swimming beaches. And indeed, these jellies can be a bit of a nuisance. As you can see, they have a lot of short, thick tentacles underneath the bell, but they also have these very long, streaming, essentially transparent tentacles that can be quite a bit longer than the jellyfish. So even if you're not actually close to what the part of the jellyfish you can see, which is that reddish brown part, those tentacles stretch a long way. So you could actually be still interacting with those tentacles, even if you're not right next to this jellyfish. So it's a little deceiving. So you definitely want to steer clear of these guys. And this beautiful jellyfish, this is a picture taken by Sean Whelan at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution during some of our leatherback sea turtle research. And this is an Atlantic sea nettle. They're very beautiful jellyfish. We see usually starting in midsummer right through fall. This year, these jellyfish were actually seen on Cape Cod right through the spring. And they can appear different depending on which sort of morph you're looking at. So in this one, you can see it has these nice little striping pattern on the bell. But some of them will just have a series of speckles over the bell. So they can look a little bit different, but they always have these sort of elegant frilled tentacles coming off of them, as well as some nice long streaming tentacles. And leatherbacks really like to eat these. Okay, so what do all these jellies have in common? Leatherback turtles like to eat them, especially these scyphozoan species I just described, like the lion's mane and the sea nettle. Those are sort of their 2 favorite flavors around Massachusetts. And so this leatherback here was actually chomping away on a lion's mane. You can see some of that lion's mane hanging out of its mouth when we were working on her for our research project. Now, leatherbacks have an entirely gelatinous diet, which is unusual in the animal kingdom. And they have some very, very cool adaptations for jelly eating. They have these fang-like cusps. So the top of this photo, you're looking at the upper jaw of the turtle. You can see the eyes at the top, and then that's an upper jaw, and the person's hand is actually pulling down the lower jaw. So on the upper jaw, they have those 2 fang-like cusps that come down, and they also have one little cusp on that lower jaw you can see between the gloved fingers. And the reason they have these sharp cusps is for actually grabbing their slippery prey. It's actually pretty hard to grab a jellyfish while you're swimming along. So that helps them sort of grasp the slippery jellyfish, as well as serrating it kind of scissor-like as they're chewing it. And you can also see very prominently in this photo is that they have these mouth and throat spines. We call these papillae, and they actually have keratinized tips. So keratin is like the same material that your fingernails and your hair are made of. They have the tips of these are actually hard. And when you look, I'll show you a photo next, but the spines actually point downward as they go down the esophagus. And speaking of the esophagus, leatherback turtles have an extremely unusual esophagus. This is just one section of a dead turtle's esophagus. You can see those downward pointing throat spines. They cover the entire esophagus. And in a leatherback sea turtle, the esophagus is over 6 feet long. Over 6 feet long. It's pretty unbelievable. In order to be that long, it actually has to go all the way down through the animal's body cavity and actually curves back up before it meets the stomach and the small intestine and the large intestine. So they have these downward pointing throat spines all the way down. And the reason for that is in order to eat lots of jellyfish and keep them moving down the esophagus and into the stomach, these downward pointing throat spines are actually helping retain those jellyfish as they're sucking them in and helping macerate them and mash them up as they move down that esophagus. I actually think of their esophagus kind of like a jellyfish conveyor belt, because these turtles are feeding continuously on jellyfish, and they need a way to sort of move them along through the system. And so these downward pointing throat spines will hold the jellyfish in, they'll mash them up, and then the turtles actually need to expel seawater when they're eating jelly. So when they suck in a big mouthful of jellyfish, they're sucking in a lot of seawater as well, which has obviously a very high salt content, and the turtle needs to expel that seawater. So what they do is they'll suck in the jellyfish, it's being held by these spines, and then they can expel the seawater without losing their meal. So that is the purpose of those spines. So I like this. This is actually looking down the throat of a leatherback. So for folks who are really resenting jellyfish and what a stinging nuisance they can be, just know that Mother Nature always seems to have the best revenge. And this is the fate of some of those jellies once the leatherbacks show up around here. And also know that those annoying jellyfish are also serving a really important purpose by sustaining this, very ancient and endangered sea turtle species. So over the years, to learn more about what leatherbacks eat, I've delved into some jellyfish research, and I picked up plenty of stings in the process of doing this research. And for my work, I was making the world's grossest. I'm catching one with my dip net. And I was most commonly catching and working with that sea nettle species, which is in the top photo with the speckled bell, and the lion's mane, which is in the bottom right photo. And to do this work, I was actually making what I considered the world's grossest jellyfish smoothies by putting these guys into a blender. We blend them up, and then we pour them into little dishes and pans, like so in the top left photo. So you basically have jellyfish soup at that point, and then we dry those in an oven. And once they're dried, we use a mortar and pestle to mash them up into what's left into a very fine powder. And why I wanted to show you this is because you can see after that jellyfish is blended and dried and ground up, what you end up with is just a teeny tiny amount of dried up jellyfish powder. So these jellyfish there's not much to them. They're mostly water. In fact, all of the jellyfish that I've worked with in the lab have been between 95 and 96% water. So there's only 4 to 5% of other stuff. Some of that is organic matter, some of that is inorganic matter, and of the organic matter that's left, which is the organic matter is the food, for the jellyfish, there's mostly protein, not much carbohydrate, and not much fat or lipid. So these turtles have to eat a tremendous number of jellyfish in order to sustain their body weight, to put on weight, and to do these energetically costly migrations that they do all the way from Massachusetts, say, all the way to South America in a given season. So they're just having to eat a tremendous, tremendous number of jellyfish. And you can see that very nicely illustrated in this video, which was taken during our turtle cam research with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And this turtle eats 5 jellyfish in about 25 seconds. So this is a nice illustration of how these turtles are just having to feed continuously. Again, they're basically eating mostly water, a little bit of organic material, which mostly consists of protein. So they really have to eat hundreds and hundreds of jellyfish per day in order to survive and thrive. And so I think the moral of this story is that we really need more leatherback turtles around, and we need them coming inshore to help put a dent in these jellyfish numbers that we're seeing here off Massachusetts this summer. And one thing I will say is that, I'm going to play that video again so you guys can all enjoy that again. One thing I will say is that when turtles do move inshore, so years when the jellyfish are really close to shore, close to beaches and in popular recreational fishing and boating areas, is that we really need to keep an eye out for them. They are vulnerable to being hit by boats. We have any number of strandings that have boat strike injuries every single summer. They can get wrapped up in fishing gear or entangled in marine debris. So when they come inshore, it actually is a pretty high risk environment for them. So what I would say is if you're seeing a lot of jellyfish inshore, I would ask that you keep your eyes peeled for these turtles and just use extra caution when you're boating, navigating the waterways, looking for an animal that might be in trouble, and calling the appropriate number. For entangled turtles, you call Center for Coastal Studies, or you can just radio the Coast Guard on Channel 16, and they will get the message to the correct people. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and switch back over so we can have some time for questions.
Great. So we have our first question from Jonathan, who asks, how are leatherbacks and other sea turtles able to eat jellyfish, even the very poisonous ones, without getting stung or hurt?
That's a great question. So everyone always asks me, how do leatherbacks eat jellyfish without getting stung? And the answer is, it's possible they are getting stung, but they don't seem to be responding to the sting the way we would. So they'll be eating these sometimes very large jellyfish where the stinging tentacles are actually streaming past their eyes and their face. And obviously, they're also ingesting the toxins from these stinging jellyfish. It seems they've adapted to neutralize the venom that's in the jellyfish sting. So we don't know how they do it, but they seem to have a mechanism for neutralizing the toxins from the venom from the jellyfish.
So cool. Another question from Catherine. She asked, why do you think not all jellyfish are, she said she meant dangerous. Why do you think not all jellyfish are dangerous? At the shore of the Eastern Sea in Germany, they're absolutely harmless.
Right. So I would say, so in terms of danger, I think we should think about, the level. So basically the jellyfish around Massachusetts, unless you have a comorbidity or an allergy or another underlying issue, you will just get stung by some of these species and it will hurt. And for me, at least in my case, it kind of feels like a poison ivy rash and it lasts for several days. It could even last for a week. So it's uncomfortable, but it's not fatal. Obviously, in other parts of the world where there are, for example, box jellyfish, and you get stung by one of those, it can be fatal. But the jellyfish around here, I would say, are more of a nuisance where they may sting you. It may be irritating, but it's not going to be fatal. It's just a nuisance. And then some jellyfish, as I described earlier, aren't going to sting you at all, like a moon jellyfish, and then those comb jellies and things like that. So it's very safe to be around those species.
Great. So it looks like we've got one more question from Electra, who asked, why is the esophagus so long on leatherback turtles?
That's a great question. So the reason we think their esophagus is so long is because those turtles are continuously feeding on those jellies. So if you're ingesting, say, a jellyfish every 5 to 10 seconds, there needs to be room for that jellyfish. Even though they can be digested pretty quickly because of the water content, you still have to have room to pack all those jellyfish in. So that's why I sort of think about it in my mind as a jellyfish conveyor belt. So they're basically sucking in, hundreds of these jellyfish in a given day, and they basically need a little bit of time to be able to process those. And by having a really long esophagus, you're sort of buying yourself more time by having more room to pack in more jellyfish. Okay. Great. So thanks for tuning in. And if anyone has any other turtle or jellyfish questions, you can always add them to the comments later, and I'm happy to go back in and answer those questions for you. But I guess I would say I would leave off with saying stay safe, stay away from the stinging species of jellies this summer, and also keep your eyes peeled for leatherbacks. You can actually see them sometimes right from the beach. If the jellies are that far inshore, sometimes the turtles will be that far inshore. So you might get lucky and be able to see some of these magnificent leatherback turtles feeding right off your beach. Thanks, everybody.